All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of Elections Weekly. Sorry we're a little bit late on starting this one. We had some people that needed time to arrive, and we had some technical difficulties on our end. We're happy to get started, though. With us today, we got Joe and Dylan. Crash should be joining us shortly as well. And we're just going to talk about today, kind of go over the election results from Tuesday's primary elections, which had some interesting results, among other things. Then we're going to talk about New York district polling. Two of the Democratic primaries in New York have had district polling released and have had their races a little more solidified in terms of what we're looking at right now. So I'm going to go ahead and start with what happened Tuesday night. So we had a bunch of primaries all over the country. We had them in Arizona, Kansas, Michigan, Missouri, and Washington. Probably the biggest one, we'll start out with the shocker of the night, which was the Kansas constitutional ballot initiative, which would have allowed the state to impose additional regulations on abortion. This amendment was pretty resoundingly rejected by voters. Pretty much all sides were trying to figure out their own explanations for why this has happened. I have theories. Everyone has theories. But regardless of what your theories are, this did very poorly. And it did specifically poorly in all the urban areas and suburban areas in the state. It's not like Democrats had massive turnout. This was still a Republican skewing primary composition. So a lot of Republicans did vote no on this referendum. We had expected this to pass narrowly to some degree. Clearly, though, what we didn't anticipate was that voters on the Republican side would be more likely to vote no on this. Again, we can kind of go into theories here real quick before we move on. My personal theory is that there are clearly a lot of the no side ran a very smart campaign. I also think the ballot initiative was really confusingly worded and just too excessive for voters to care about, and also fairly difficult to just amend constitutions to begin with. There usually needs to be a good reason, and I don't think the yes side did a very good job of elaborating what they wanted, and it went far beyond what a lot of voters found acceptable. We've talked about this privately, but there's only a handful of states in the country that would ban abortion by referendum, period. They'd be like Louisiana, and that's basically it. Like, there's not a whole lot of other countries on that list, a lot of states on that list. I don't know what you guys are thinking about it, but it clearly was an interesting result if you look here. Like, for example, Kansas City, 74% no, Wyandotte County, Johnson County, 68% no, Sedgwick County, home to Wichita, 59% no, obviously liberal Douglas County, home to Lawrence, 81% no, and then Shawnee County, home to Topeka, 66% no, along with a scattering of more rural counties and the College County of Riley, which went from a ancestrally Republican county to one that Democrats won for the first time in about 100 years or so. But what are your guys' thoughts on this?
I don't know if you could really put it any better, quite honestly, Eric. But, I don't know. I was thinking of surprised by the margin. I wasn't necessarily surprised by the result. Referendums like these have had issues with passing even in the deepest of the deep red states before. It's not really necessarily a surprise to me that's happened again. It's not a surprise that people do not like going straight to another extreme where, in theory, abortion is totally, completely banned by a legislature. People do not like that. So It is not really a surprise to me that they voted it down. I was maybe surprised at the result, maybe in those kind of more rural counties, the Wichita area. I think I would have expected to see maybe a bit more blue, but otherwise, I think the result as a whole is not necessarily all that unsurprising to me.
Yeah, I mean, I expected it to fail by a narrow margin, but no, I'm not super surprised by the result. I think people drastically underestimate how pro-choice voters are, and further than that, it's like you said, the no campaign was really smartly run. They appealed to the libertarian instincts of more conservative voters, and I think that paid off. I think that's how you're going to win in areas like this. You have to appeal to the individual liberty aspect of it, and the no campaign did that, I think, superbly.
There are a couple comments I want to get through here that I think are very good, though, because we have given some live comments here. So this is from Tanner Brannon. Wouldn't have just been better to put a 15-week threshold on the ballot instead? Going for this was risky. I personally agree with this. I don't know if 15 weeks would have been the right amount. I think clearly polls have shown for the last 5 decades, ever since Roe, that voters do not like late-term abortions. They don't like abortions after viability. Before viability, overwhelmingly in favor. And then the further you go into the pregnancy, the more people are open to restrictions. They're also more open to things like parental notification, spousal notification, no abortions for minor abortions outside of other things are a little bit more questionable in terms of like needing that parental approval, waiting period. All this stuff has been shown to be pretty popular. It's not really been tested in states, but we've looked at states like South Dakota, I believe, had a referendum. Mississippi had a referendum. And welcome, Kraz, here. We're talking about the Kansas referendum right now. But cool. Go back to this question here so we can kind of put it up. Would it be better for the 15-week threshold on the ballot instead? I was saying, I think specifics were the idea here was that they could be non-specific and voters could take it whatever they meant. They could assume it could be weaker. But I think a lot of people, like Matthew said here, interpret it as the threshold to a blanket ban, which is clearly very unpopular.
Yeah, I mean, I think it clearly would have been better strategically for the yes side to go with a 15-week ban. I think that probably would have passed. But yes, the ballot initiative was very weirdly worded, but wasn't it deliberately weirdly worded? Like that wasn't a mistake.
Yeah, that was the point.
Yeah.
It was long and confusing. I've compared it to a leftist meme in terms of the verbosity of the text because it frankly resembles that. Like the meme of the skeleton just pointing at a wall of text. Like that's basically it. Like no one's going to read all that.
Yeah, I would say it's a little bit weird to me because like usually ballot measures being walls of text like hurts the yes side. Like you don't want it to be a wall of text, right? You want it to be simple and short and sweet. And yet the yes side was the ones who, the Kansas GOP were the ones who actually wrote this ballot measure and got on the ballot and they made it a wall of text. Why? I have no idea. I think because they thought by putting in a bunch of stuff about like, we value them both. We are trying to be balanced. They would win over people, but that's not really how it works.
No. Here's my suggestion. Here's my bold suggestion. And this would, again, require the pro-life campaign to sit back and think for a second rather than just instinctively being, okay, we got rid of Roe. Now let's accelerate further. They're actually making the same mistake that I think a lot of people on the right have said that the gay rights movement has made, where once they got Obergefell, it was then, okay, we're going to go immediately into this other stuff. Whether you agree with that or not, that's a common complaint the right has made about that side. They've clearly not been following their own advice because going straight to a total ban is like even further in the realms of ridiculousness. What if the amendment was just read, the Constitution of Kansas should not be interpreted to mean that abortions after viability, after fetal viability, with the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother, are prohibited. Or are not allowed, that the legislature cannot pass laws doing this. I think that would have done better. It's still got that sort of confusion issue, but as it is right now, if I were to pull up the actual text of this, and I'm going to try and pull it up right here.
Oh, I don't know. Do you really want to do that?
Yeah, I don't know that we should.
Eric, I think you're missing, but nobody wants that, right? Like, first off, abortion is already banned at 22 weeks in Kansas, I think. I want to say it's 22 weeks. So it's already banned, like, at roughly viability, and also, like, pro-life activists don't want a measure on the ballot that's just going to be like, let's ban it after viability. Like their view,
they want to ban it.
Yeah, so like no one wants that, right? Like
because no, they don't. And I think the other thing is it's a little odd, I think, to say we're banning late-term abortions except in cases of rape, incest, or life of the mother, when those are generally the only reasons somebody's going to do a late-term abortion.
But then the weird thing is on the Democrats for saying, no, that's entirely and totally unacceptable, which I think Kraz has mentioned, like, you should just cede on this because it's like that's the majority of scenarios where you'd have an exception for this. Yeah, this is the text right here. Like, it's a lot of text.
Too long.
It's too long.
Oh, boy.
It's too long. Yeah.
Again, text, so it's like Adam text.
I'm in copyright. I was in advertising undergrad. You cut like 2/3 of this. That is too long for a social media post, let alone a ballot. Voters do not have that long an attention span.
They clearly don't.
I did want to do kind of an analysis of these results and kind of talk about like why I didn't see them coming, and kind of some of my assumptions that were busted, because I think it's both interesting and I think it's instructive for how sometimes your assumptions can get busted by unique scenarios.
Sure. So I'll pull that result back up for you here.
Yeah.
So I got the screen share works a little bit worse on Firefox than on Safari, but it's much smoother on Firefox. There we go.
Yeah. So when these results were coming in, I thought that the pro-choice side was not hitting its benchmarks, but it clearly was. The reason I was wrong was because I made a number of erroneous assumptions about the electorate. So the first bad assumption I made was that the primary electorate would be something like 70-30 Republican. In 2018, it was 67-33 Republican, and I thought for sure it would get redder. It did not. It was only 62-38 Republican. So it actually got 10 points bluer because Democrats were energized by this referendum. I did not expect that. So that kind of busted all my benchmarks. Secondly, I did not expect there to be a ton of unaffiliated voters who showed up and largely split for the pro-choice side. I did not think there'd be very many unaffiliated voters. I thought it would be pretty much everybody who voted in the primary. And also, kind of related, I did not expect the pro-choice side to hold up remarkably well with election day voters. Like, I thought election day voters, I mean, this kind of related to primary composition. I thought election day voters were going to be like 80-20 Republican. Like, I thought it was going to be just like massively Republican. And we had heard rumors about there being really high turnout, and that was true. There was super high turnout, but it wasn't the people we thought were turning out. I thought it was going to be pretty much all Republicans, and the pro-choice side's numbers were going to tank like no tomorrow when the election day vote came in. But that did not happen. Held up remarkably well. And we also saw this in Nebraska, where the Democrat, lost ground in that special election when election day vote came in, but not to the degree that maybe we were all expecting. So this is kind of an interesting trend. But yeah, so those are kind of the reasons my expectations fell apart, because I did not see this coming. I thought the pro-life side was going to win. And the pro-choice side won by 17.5 points. So
yeah. Fair to say this is a disaster if the pro-life side wants to win in referendums in the future, they're going to need to look at this and strongly reconsider the path they've chosen, the arguments they're making, because clearly that campaign didn't work. I think regardless of why it didn't work, it clearly didn't work, and it was very, very bad. This is the biggest failure the right has probably seen in the ballot initiative since the right to work failure in Missouri. And the right's lesson they've seen to learn there was just to not put that up on the ballot in Missouri. Which is a choice. That is a choice that's been made, but like, they're not going to do that with abortion. That's not something that they're going to just say we're giving up on.
No.
I think what they really got to fear long term is the states having referendums on abortion access and then being maximal and going beyond what Roe already had. That could be the worst case scenario for the pro-life side of the argument.
I just think what's probably going to happen, right? If I had to bet, is pro-choice activists are going to look at this. They're going to say, okay, let's just put this on the ballot. Let's put access on the ballot up to 15 weeks or maybe even longer on every state where we can get it on in 2024. And that's every state where you can get constitutional amendments on the ballot where abortion is currently illegal by statute. You've got Arizona, Utah, Missouri, Ohio, Florida. Well, I guess Florida's not illegal, but whatever. Florida, Idaho, Montana, both Dakotas, Nebraska. Like, yeah, it wouldn't necessarily pass in all of those places, right? Like, I think it would have a really tough road to sled in Idaho, for example. But I think it'd have a very strong chance of passing in Montana. In Missouri has similar partisanship to Kansas. Ohio, for sure, I think it'd have a very strong chance. Arizona and Florida seem like layups.
Florida would be Florida. Keep on Florida. You need the 60%. I'm pretty sure it's not just a clean 50. You got to get 60% in Florida. That would be unfair. I would think that would be enough. But like, I could see a scenario where the right mobilizes enough in a presidential election year to vote solidly against that. I could see that of not making that 40% floor or not getting at 60%. But
I would have said that before this though. But like this referendum, like something like 25% of GOP primary voters, which primary voters are even more partisan than general election voters, voted to not let the legislature regulate abortion in Kansas. And so, I think it's possible. I just think like, if you're a pro-choice activist, you're looking at this and you're like, well, damn, we can just put constitutional amendments, little mini rows on the ballot. Oh, Utah also needs 60, so Utah, that wouldn't pass. But like, and Utah's a tough road anyway. But like, you would just look at this and be like, we just put mini rows in the Constitution in like a bunch of different states that currently have pro-life laws, and that'd be a huge defeat for the pro-life movement.
But I think putting abortion access on the ballot, even if it doesn't pass, is probably a good strategy for the Democrats in 2024. Make abortion the top issue, make abortion a top issue, and you've got something there.
It was part of the Bush strategy in 2004, was specifically the Bush strategy in 2004, even though Dick Cheney publicly supported same-sex marriage during that election, like he actually publicly supported it, was for the Bush administration to basically piggyback off of same-sex marriage bans in states like Oregon, for example, where I think Bush lost by 4 points in Oregon. That amendment passed. I think the theory was that you would have those on the ballot. It would mobilize Republicans to turn out and vote. So, if Democrats aren't thrilled with Biden or whoever the nominee is, they may at least still go out to vote for, the abortion referendum.
Right. I think that should be the strategy. I was going to mention Bush. Like, follow that model.
Yeah. But I think we've gone over Kansas enough. So kind of let's go into some of the other results here. In particular, Missouri, really interesting. Not so much interesting in terms of the outcome, but in terms of just the margin here. Eric Schmidt easily won this primary. He won at 45-22 over Vicky Hartzler. And then Eric Greitens was in third at 18% of the vote. Billy Long at 5%, and then Mark McCloskey at a paltry 3%. For a while, McCloskey was beating Billy Long. I think that was until the Billy Long district actually came in to vote. The big thing here, of course, is that Trump before Election Day endorsed Eric. He just endorsed Eric as a concept instead of Eric as a candidate. So he, in theory, endorsed both candidates, although there's a third Eric on the ballot who presumably also benefited from that endorsement in some manner, given that his name is, in fact, Eric. Side note, the Council of Erics has officially declared that Eric Greitens is Eric with a K now, E-R-I-C-K. So he's no longer included in ERIC. Just figured I'd note that on behalf of all Erics everywhere. We don't claim him. But the big thing here, though, is that clearly this did not work for Greitens. He did very poorly. He only won 3 counties in the Boot Hill. This is also the area of the state that had the strongest support for George Wallace in 1968, to give you an idea of the strength in the region. George Wallace actually won one of these counties. So they have a tendency to support really bad candidates in a lot of manners, but he only won 3 counties. And he did horribly in all of the metro areas. Kansas, St. Louis City, he only got 15% of the vote. Eric Schmidt almost got 60%. That's in St. Louis County. I think in the city it was even worse. Jackson County, he only got 16%. Eric Schmidt got 51%. And then even in some of the ones where Hartzler won closer to her district, Greitens only got 11%, 16%, really, really bad margins for someone who's a former governor and who nominally had a Trump endorsement. What is your takeaway here? Obviously, populists have been kind of rallying behind Greitens as their choice, but a lot of the Missouri GOP straight up hates him, including Josh Hawley, including a lot of people just in general were not big fans of Eric Greitens even before his numerous scandals, to put it lightly.
Yeah, glad Eric Greitens is gone. Glad he'll probably never be able to seek public office again.
He'll seek it. He just probably won't win it.
Well, he can be a perennial candidate for the rest of his life. That would
actually I will take the back. If he is in prison, he won't be able to really seek public office effectively at that point.
Yes. Although, don't let that stop someone like Joe Arpaio. I'm pretty sure he's been on trial. But no, I mean, look, I'm not thrilled with any of them, but hey, glad the alleged child abuser did not win. This is good.
And wife abuser, don't forget.
And wife abuser.
Partner abuser.
Yes. This is a good result, and I'm sure I will hate almost everything Eric Schmidt does in the Senate, but this is a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And since I think we've kind of gone over that, let's go over to Arizona, which was an interesting state in a lot of ways.
You were not too harsh on it, Eric.
No, I was not too harsh on it. So there were two theories of polls before election night. One group of polls showed Kari Lake with a decisive lead. The other group of polls showed a close race. It turns out this is a close race. Kari Lake won every county in the state, but she's only leading the vote by about 4%. Her margin of victory is less than Matt Salmon's total on the ballot, and he had endorsed Karen Robson. Now, Lake was obviously the Trump endorsed candidate. She pretty much ran a campaign almost solely focused on election fraud complaints. Obviously, these are unjustified. These have been not backed by anyone. These are complete nonsense. But she had the Trump endorsement and has been one of the vanguard of Kelly Ward's string of delusional candidates that have won apparently almost all of the primaries in Arizona. So truly the meth lab of democracy, as the great Senator Kirsten Sinema once said. I complained about that at the time, but she's clearly accurate. Like if this is the choice, if it's Kari Lake or Katie Hobbs on the Democratic side, who's the nominee there, this is not a good ticket for Republicans. You also got Blake Masters. He won his primary by 11%. Clearly, the Trump endorsement helped here.
That margin grew a lot more than it was at on election night. I remember we both thought that was really underwhelming.
Yeah, it's still underwhelming. It's only 39% of the vote. He had the Trump endorsement. Brnovich barely ran a campaign. Jim Lamon had a ton of money, but clearly that was not enough to do a whole lot. Masters has, of course, had his own controversies, which I've mentioned all of them. I will not even bother listing them out. If you've listened to us talk about Blake Masters, you are aware of all of these.
That's very true.
Yeah. So flawed candidate here as well. Eli Crane won the 2nd district primary. I think Republicans got a good candidate in the 6th. They do have a good candidate there. That's the newly competitive district around Tucson. That was made a little bit more conservative, leaning in redistricting. It took in some more rural areas and dropped. I think it had like Greenlee County and Graham County, along with more parts of Pinal County and Pima. Conservative district. Republicans should be. We have that as already as a flip even before this came in, even before these results came in. I don't think we're changing that.
So did Schweikert win?
Yes, he won, and he won by an underwhelming margin as per usual. He won, I think, 45% of the vote.
Wasn't that much. I think it was around 44, actually.
Yeah, he won by about 10. Yeah, he won 43% of the vote. Elijah Norton had 33%. Josh Barnett had 23%. Schweikert may be on borrowed time in this seat. This is both a more competitive seat, and clearly he has issues as a candidate. He's a perennial underperformer. He's right up there with Scott, who was the Colorado guy, Doug Lamborn, in the class of underwhelming primary performing Republicans. He's clearly right up there. But yeah, obviously, Arizona chose its path in the election. We have the governor race at a toss-up and the Senate race at a toss-up. What do you think of this ticket? I know there were some conservatives who were suggesting that Masters Robson would be a pretty decent ticket. Almost none of them were psyched by a Masters Lake ticket.
I don't think it's that bad of a ticket. I don't think it's a good ticket, but in this kind of environment, I think it's probably a good enough ticket.
Yeah. See, I'm kind of with Dylan. I think it's kind of good enough, except I think Lake is weaker than Masters just because governor races tend to divert more from linear partisanship than Senate races. So
see, I would flip that because I think Kelly is a far better candidate than Hobbs.
I would actually argue that it's kind of weird. I think Republicans have a better shot at holding the gubernatorial race. I also think that Kari Lake is a much worse candidate than Blake Masters. But here's the difference, is that Katie Hobbs is not in a good position right now. She has a string of controversies behind her from her tenure in office. These are serious issues. For whatever Kari Lake has done, she has sprouted a ton of delusional nonsense. She's not been accused of the sort of stuff that Katie Hobbs has been accused of, the sort of misconduct with workplace issues. She doesn't have that on her. That's not something you can attack her on, and that's something Hobbs will be attacked on. On the other hand, Mark Kelly has a very liberal voting record, but he has a lot of money. He's clearly a better candidate, has a better, track record.
He's got good vibes too, Mark
Yeah.
Kelly.
Mark,
He gives off the good vibes of a moderate.
Yeah,
like
he's an astronaut. He's a former astronaut. And
Yeah.
unlike Bill Nelson, he's an actual astronaut. Like he actually has reasonably cool vibes.
I would literally describe Mark Kelly as a rich generic Democrat plus astronaut.
Yeah,
That's him.
Yeah, he has a fairly reasonably compelling backstory with Giffords, even though that's more Giffords than him. I mean, it does tie into it. He does have that track record there. He's not tacked an extreme gun violence issue in the Senate, which could have alienated some voters. He's basically put that on the back burner, oddly enough. But yeah, Masters is probably the better of the two candidates on the Republican side, but he's facing a tougher headwind. On the other hand, this is still looking to be not a great year for Democrats. And this is a state Biden only won by a fraction of a percent. Very competitive state still. So, it's not ideal. It's not an ideal ticket, but we both have both of these races as a toss-up, and I don't think we're moving them anytime soon unless it comes out that, like, Blake Masters has done something really awful beyond, praising the Unabomber or something. Like, it'll need to be something actually terrible.
Beyond all the really terrible things he's already said.
Yeah, beyond all of that.
I actually wanted to do a little bit on this because I'm getting a little bit worried about Republicans' numbers, some of the indicators, because I think some of the indicators we have don't really point to a great Republican year. And I for a while, I kind of brushed them off because Biden's approval sucks so bad, and his approval still does suck really bad. But it's getting kind of late in the cycle to where I'm getting a little bit antsy about these indicators because yeah, it's true that Republican waves in 2010 and 2014 built later in the cycle. The generic ballot didn't get really Republican until later. But during those cycles, things like special election results and the California primaries and the Washington primaries actually were a better indicator. They told us things the generic ballot didn't. And they portended where the generic ballot would actually end up versus right now, all those indicators still point to exactly where the generic ballot is. And so that kind of now it's getting late enough in the cycle to where I'm a little bit antsy about potentially this being not as good of a year as they expect.
Yeah, I mean, it would be as the term is coined in the group chat, we would really be in the silly zone if Joe Biden could be at a 39% approval rating and still come through the midterms with R+1 or R+2. We would really be in the silly zone, but I can weirdly see it.
See, I'm still we're working against literally a trend that has lasted the entire history of the United States as a two-party system here. So that's the big hang up here and we know polling is broken. We know some of it's broken. The Washington thing, I do want to see where the ballot actually ends up there. That's probably the most compelling indicator I've seen.
We have special elections on Tuesday.
No, the special elections are the New York ones. I think are next week. There's
2 weeks. August 23rd.
2 weeks. Why do I keep thinking they're just the next week from now? What the?
No, they're in a couple weeks. Clearly.
Yeah, you have thought this a couple times.
Yeah, wait. This is like how New York counts ballots. You always think the end is almost here, and then it's never actually almost here.
August 23rd is a special election night in New York.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
no, Kraz is actually right. Next week there is a special election. Minnesota first.
Minnesota won. That's going to be an interesting one.
Let's go.
Yeah, Minnesota's first. Brad Finstead versus Jeffrey Ettinger.
Yeah.
Wait, why is there a special election in Minnesota's first?
Because Hadjorn died. Remember, he had kidney cancer and he died.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
It's been a whirlwind of a year. I don't know what's happening anymore.
So yeah, needless to say, we're going to be keeping an eye on all of this stuff. But before we start to close off, we want to go over New York 10 and 12. Those have had some interesting ones. I'll go ahead and I've not paid too much of attention to these polls. So I'll throw it to someone who knows this more than I do. I've only seen them in passing. I haven't paid too much attention to them. So what's going on in those two races?
Dylan?
So we'll start with New York 10 because I think that's the more interesting one. So New York 10 had another poll released. It was a Dan Goldman internal. It had him in the lead. It had him at 18%. It had Yulie New at 16, and then Carolina Riviera, I believe is her name, at 14%.
Where's Holtzman?
I think Holtzman, I believe, and I could be wrong, I believe Holtzman is still ahead of Mondaire Jones. If not right there.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting about these polls, they all show the same result. They all show that same top three. But if I'm not mistaken, I know this new one, this new poll was conducted only in English, which seems like a poor indicator of the actual district.
There are some Asian communities, and then obviously there's small part of Borough Park. It's not a huge portion of it, but there is a part there.
Yeah, so an English only poll is going to get the older white voters who are probably tend to go for someone like Goldman.
Eric, I hate to interrupt, but I have some bad news for you.
Oh, what?
Joe Kent, with still around 30,000 votes left to go.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
County. Joe Kent is now only about 450 votes behind Jamie Herrera Butler in the 3rd district.
Deeply unfortunate. And again,
unless something massively changes, Joe Kent will be going up against Marie Perez in the 3rd district.
That's deeply unfortunate. And again, I do want to mention Kent has like actual legitimate problems of ties with white nationalists. So this is not a guy you want to be running in 2024. Probably
is there any chance that this puts the seat in play this cycle?
I mean, it depends on what
we're probably going to shift it to likely now.
Yeah,
it's only like a Trump plus 3 seat.
Yeah, it's a Trump plus 4 seat. This would not be one we would hold, mainly because again, Kent is not on paper. He's very, very strange ideologically. The problem is again those actual problematic ties with like Nick Fuentes in the gang that are actual vulnerabilities in a general election in Washington State.
Good job, Republicans.
Yeah, that's a problem.
You nominated a white nationalist populist.
Yeah. I wouldn't specifically call him a white nationalist, but I would say he's adjacent. He's certainly alt-right in terms of his... Again, this is a guy who's basically indistinguishable from a socialist on a lot of economic issues, so I'm not sure how happy he'd be in the caucus to begin with. But yeah, this is the sort of guy that could actually give you problems in 2024, even if he wins, because this is the Trump plus 4 seat. It's got a very rapidly growing portion in Clark County, which is Portland suburbs. Butler is very moderate, is very popular in the district, or was very popular for the impeachment vote. The bright side, though, is Newhouse seems to be fine. I would have thought, Newhouse seems to be reasonably fine in his seat against Culp. But yeah, this is a potential problem. But let's go back to New York real quick. Yes.
So the fact that the poll is conducted only in English it leads me to believe that it might be overestimating Dan Goldman because that just seems to be his voter demographic.
The white people.
The white people, indeed, the old white people. But he has a lot of money. He's already
have a lot of money.
He's already raised like $1.2 million, and I think he said he was going to lend his campaign like $3 million.
Is this the impact research poll today, Dylan? Or
yeah, I think it's impact research.
That is apparently a Goldman internal.
Yes, it is a Dan Goldman internal. So I think we do have our top 3. I think it's really interesting, and I want to analyze it once the primary is over, that Mondaire Jones just didn't go anywhere. I want to know why that is. But hey, and then New York 12, Carolyn Maloney seems to be down. According to Memerson, anyway.
Oh, can we call them Memerson anymore? They were like by far like the closest one in Arizona for that gubernatorial race, like marginally compared to everyone else.
But like Carolyn Maloney losing would be kind of funny.
Carolyn Maloney, man, you have to be really bad to get me to like Jerry Nadler more. She's done it. I don't like Jerry Nadler, but at least he's not an anti-vaxxer.
Have you considered that Jerry Nadler likes pandas? Like, I really think we're discounting this as a political issue.
I'm still surprised Suraj Patel decided to run. Like, does he think he has a chance? Like, I'm confused.
Oh, wait. Did you guys hear about this? I want you guys to guess which Republican politician endorsed Carolyn Maloney. It's a sitting member of Congress. I want you guys to guess. Without looking it up, no one look it up. I want you guys to guess.
This is gonna be so bad. I mean,
This is going to be really bad.
I want one guess from everyone before I say it.
Matt
Malia
Gates.
Pockets?
Matt Gates.
Dylan,
Wait, so-
I'm going to go with Eric first here. Eric
Nicole Maliatakis?
Kraz.
Okay, I think I would have seen it if it was Matt Gates. So I'm gonna say Thomas Massey.
Thomas
I'm
Massey.
I'm sticking with Matt Gates.
Well, Dylan, aren't you a winner today, buddy? As endorsed, Carolyn Maloney. For
That's a
re-election.
big constituency in the Democratic primary in Manhattan. People who listen to what Matt Gates says.
Yeah, Carolyn Maloney.
What, was
has
this like a
taken-
glowing endorsement, or was it just like a half-hearted
It
endorsement?
was a
I'm
tweet where he
confused.
said, "I really hope Maloney wins. Nadler is the worst."
Nadler is the worst, but only above Carolyn Maloney. He picked the perfect incumbent to run against in New York. And Suraj Patel down 20 points to Maloney, so he's all the way down at 11%. I don't know what he thought he was going to get out of this. Reina Abdul-Himad had a better chance of winning this primary, and she had the sense to drop out. And she was a good candidate.
Yeah, I don't know what. Yeah, I don't think going up against two Democratic committee chairs is a good idea in a primary if you're, Suraj Patel.
Mm.
But sometimes vanity runs are a thing, I guess.
Oh, this is his third run, so I mean, I feel like this is just personal for him at this point. It has nothing to do with whether he'd win or not. I think he just doesn't like Carolyn Maloney. I don't know.
It's an interesting time to be a New Yorker, that's for sure.
Yeah, I still don't think we have a good picture of what's going on in New York 10 because I don't know if anyone has the right polling for that. But
Hooray for Flying Blind. Woo.
hooray! I fully expect this to be like that Oklahoma primary where there were like 5 candidates within 1% of each other. Fully expect that to happen here. And if Elizabeth Holtzman wins, I will not be surprised. This is a weird time. That's all I got.
Yeah. What a night it was.
What a
Yeah.
night it was.
That's what it is for sure.
And I guess after we went off last Tuesday, Peter Meyer got obliterated by the late ballots.
Unfortunately.
Yes.
Yeah, this is absolutely a clear. This is absolutely a clear example of a primary that Democrats meddled in that actually had a significant outcome change.
Yeah,
I think it's
won't
almost
argue that.
inarguable that you can attribute. I mean, because they spent the majority of John Gibbs's money, and just to push back on what people have said on Twitter, I've seen people on Twitter who clearly have no clue what they're talking about, saying that all the DNC was doing was exposing John Gibbs as an extremist. No, they were platforming him as like a normal Trump conservative. They're like, oh, this guy is so conservative because he supports Donald Trump and he wants patriotic education and wants to build the border wall. It's like
if Democrats ran ads saying John Gibbs says Democrats eat babies, which he has said,
yeah.
if they ran those ads, I would be much more sympathetic to that argument.
But no, this would be like, again, Republicans running an ad. Like if there was like an Ilhan Omar quality candidate running in like a Biden +3 seat, running a candidate that's not like, she says she doesn't like Israel, supports BDS and wants, communism. Well, it's like actual full communism. And so we're looking at that, like this person is so liberal because they support abortion rights and they want universal health care. It's like,
And they want climate regulation.
yeah, they want climate regulations. It's like, come on, you got to be a little bit more honest here. They're actually these ads were they were literally mainstreaming the guy.
I have no issue with the DCCC saying, "Hey, it looks like John Gibbs is going to win. Let's start running attack ads now."
Mm-hmm.
They clearly weren't doing that though.
It wasn't an attack ad; it was a veiled positive ad.
Exactly. Don't insult my intelligence by saying it was anything else. I have eyes.
And the only people's intelligence are being insulted are people on Twitter. Like most of the Democratic caucus actually gets this and the potential detriments of what this could cause to future bipartisanship with lawmakers. But that would be a story for another time.
It's not that I see a lot of people being like, oh, it's so absurd to say that the DCCC money caused Gibbs to win or whatever, like that takes away agency from Republican voters. And it's like, nobody is trying to say that all these primaries are because of the DCCC, right? Like
Mhm.
the issue isn't that they're causing these wins, right? If they're not causing the wins, then why are they spending the money? They clearly think they can have an impact. Parties don't spend money for charity. It's not charity. So
No, and
the idea,
Here's the thing with that too, is that it's like Ron, like in Colorado, like Ron Hanks raised like $40,000 and he got 45% of the vote. Do you know why a man who raised $40,000 in a statewide race got 45% of the vote? Because the Democratic Senate Committee pumped $4 million into supporting him.
and
Like what do we think?
beyond the effectiveness of it, let's say it's completely ineffective.
These people don't have any money. That's
Yeah.
like the whole point of these morons, is
And-
that they have no money.
Yeah,
And then
and-
when you give them money, who knew that has an effect in primaries?
Yeah, and beyond that, let's say it's completely ineffective. Let's go with that. Okay. If you say that John Gibbs is a threat to democracy, which he is, why are you spending money to help him? Why are you spending money to normalize him? Say he says that Democrats eat babies. That's an actual attack ad. You can't say they're a threat to democracy and then promote them. Do I disagree with almost every vote Peter Meyer took in the House? Yeah, I don't like most of them, but I think it's pretty inarguable that he wasn't as big of a threat to democracy as John Gibbs.
And I forget who I saw this from on Twitter. I think it was Sean Trend, actually, from Real Clear Politics. I think one of the big things in my purview is that I think what he said was that if you want to say that this is just trying to, to push back against Meyer heavily in, because you want to go guns blazing against him, like one of the few like true pickup opportunities Democrats have in this cycle, like that's fine. But you can save that for a general election then, if you think even with Meyer, this is like one of your top targets in 2022.
Yep.
Like there's no reason then in your mind then to pump $450,000 into John Gibbs' campaign, basically.
Yeah, well, what I was going to say too is like, okay, say it doesn't matter, right? It's not making a difference. Then why are Democrats spending the money? They clearly think it makes a difference, right? They're not doing it just for fun. Also, like, okay, if you think that there's a real threat to democracy and you think the most important thing in the world is coming together to defeat people who are enemies of democracy, and you think it's so important that every Republican should put aside their partisanship and vote for Democrats or
democracy.
Or reject the Republican Party. If you think that it's such a danger that, that Republicans should cross over, then the fact that you are funding these people and then using the excuse like, well, politics is politics. We're not going to stop playing politics just because, there's this threat going on. Like, then you're bullshitting, right? You're totally bullshitting, right? If democracy is so important that everybody needs to put everything else aside, then fine, you can try to beat Peter Meyer in a general election, but you shouldn't be funding his, election denying opponent in the primary. Like, that is clearly not pro-democracy. Right. Like, and I saw people try to justify this by like, well, it's better for democracy if there are Democrats in swing districts and moderate Republicans in red districts. And I was like, okay, even if you accept that as true, that assumes that the DCCC can just wave a magic wand and pick whoever it wants to represent all of these districts, which it cannot. The reason people get mad about boosting people like Mastriano and Gibbs is that, yeah, sure, it does probably raise the odds that a Democrat wins the seat, but it also significantly raises the odds that an election denier wins the seat. So like, I just think it makes your concerns that you gush about all the time look fundamentally so unserious when you fund shit like this.
Yeah, I mean, if you think someone's a threat to democracy, treat them like a threat to democracy. Don't expect voters to believe you, though, if you beat out Republicans who, quote, protected democracy with you by basically using their moderate status against them. I mean, no, sorry. I mean,
well, and so I see somebody in the chat, Heather Green, saying it feels like letting Republicans off the hook as if it's the DCCC's fault. I don't think that's what we're saying. Like, I think that what I've said is like the DCCC is not actually causing these candidates to win. Like, I don't think they're causing these candidates to win. I think Republican voters are choosing these candidates, and I think in virtually every case they would have chosen these candidates anyway. What I'm just saying is like it's hypocritical, I guess, to like do all this stuff about threat to democracy and Republicans need to put aside party and put country over party and then like go fund these people, right? Like, I think that even if it's not making a difference, which I don't think it is in the end, it still like makes it look unserious and kind of hypocritical. And so like that's more what I was saying. I don't think that it's you can blame the DCCC for these people winning in some way.
No, the DCCC isn't responsible. The Republicans picked John Gibbs. Right. But Democrats are really bad at keeping their messaging consistent. And this is probably the starkest example of that. And that's why I think we're being so critical of them. I know Kraz and I have been very frustrated with Democratic messaging.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been frustrated as a Republican, like usually actively campaigning against those type of candidates in primaries, especially back here in Pennsylvania, and then like become very frustrated when like a mail or an ad comes in that's like supposed to come off as like an attack ad, but then you see it's like very clearly like just like, well, this guy like he supported like limits on abortion and he supported building the wall and he supported cutting down on spending, but it's it's hard for me enough to do the job now. And when you add like the point about what's the ability to beat back these guys, the fact that usually they don't have money, and when they don't have money, they can't get out their message. I'm not going to deny and sit here and say there's not been a considerable grasp on this messaging that has overtaken a significant voter base of my party. I'm not going to sit here and deny that. However, when you are giving money to people who have that messaging but don't have the money in the first place to get it out there, and then you give them that in some way or form a type of monetary boost in that regard, it does become frustrating to me. And I think that's probably the last topic we're going to cut down here tonight. Thank you to Kraz and Dylan for coming out tonight. Eric had to go early. He had a little event at 8:30 he had to get out to, and we all have our own things. It's a Friday night, so we all have our own things we want to get to anyways. But anyways, thank you guys for listening tonight to another episode of Elections Weekly. I don't believe at this point we're planning on being live for the 9th. We might be just because of that Minnesota.
What's on the 9th?
Well, that's what I'm checking right now. The 9th, of course, with that Minnesota special. Connecticut. Oh, you know what? Yes, we will be, because next week is Wisconsin's gubernatorial primary as well, along with primary elections in Minnesota and Connecticut. So, yes, we will be on next week, I should say, for those races. We will be back here. I believe polls close in Wisconsin and Minnesota at 8 o'clock Eastern time. So we'll be here live at 8 o'clock Eastern time on Tuesday, August 9th, to cover those races. And, of course, big ones will be the Wisconsin Republican primary for governor. And as we surprisingly talked about last night, really maybe the first good sign about where the ballot is, we have a special election in Minnesota's 1st congressional district, which I believe in its old form I forget what it was. It was weird because like Hagedorn underperformed Trump massively, so I always get confused about what its actual ballot will be. Yeah, so at this point, thank you guys for coming on. Thank you guys for listening tonight. Thank you for coming on. Save some of these questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to them, but we do have to get off. But save some of these questions for Tuesday. We'll be on and we'll be talking to them then. Thank you guys for coming on. Have a great rest of your evening.